In every neighborhood, there's a line between order and control, a line between safety and power. And sometimes, the people meant to protect the community are the very ones who push it too far. Millstone Grove was supposed to be a quiet place. Trimmed lawns, friendly waves, summer barbecues. But behind the smiles and HOA newsletters was something else. A growing force masked as regulation that turned neighbors into suspects and rules into weapons. That is, until one man decided he'd had enough. Not just a resident, not just a sheriff, but a reminder that justice doesn't retire at the edge of a property line. This is what happened when a suburban empire fell. Sheriff Noah Redding never asked for drama. After 2 decades in law enforcement and 5 years of service in the Army before that, all he wanted now was a little peace and quiet. His cabin on the edge of Aspen Valley wasn't much. Modest porch, overgrown pines, a long gravel drive, but it was his. He'd specifically chosen that spot for a reason. It sat just outside the official HOA zone. No newsletter fines for mailbox designs. No rules about lawn length or patriotic wind chimes. It was freedom. At least, it had been. That morning, Noah stood barefoot in his kitchen, sipping strong coffee and listening to old blues hum from the radio. The sun cut golden lines through the blinds. He was halfway through a mental debate about whether to go fishing or finish repairing the shed roof when someone banged on his front door. 3 sharp knocks. Urgent. He opened it to find his neighbor, Tom Braddock, red-faced and sweating through his flannel shirt. Tom was a retired postal worker who mostly kept to himself, so for him to show up unannounced, this had to be serious. "They've lost their goddamn minds, Noah," Tom huffed, still catching his breath. "The HOA, they laid down spike strips on Maple Ridge." Noah blinked. "Spike strips? Like the kind used to stop runaway felons?" Tom nodded frantically. "Right at the neighborhood entrance. Hit a car this morning. Blew both tires. I thought it was some prank until I saw one of the HOA clowns standing there with a clipboard." Noah set his mug down slowly. "You're sure it's HOA, not the county?" "Positive. County doesn't put uniformed rent-a-cops in golf carts. It's them. Full vest, radio, the whole act." Noah grabbed his keys. "Let's go." They drove in silence. As Noah turned onto Maple Ridge Road, he saw it. 3 sets of retractable metal teeth spanning the entire width of the road. A security guard, mid-40s, buzz-cut, mirrored sunglasses, stood next to them like he was guarding a nuclear facility. He had the smug posture of a man who'd been waiting his whole life to enforce authority he didn't earn. Noah rolled down his window. "Morning, you mind telling me what this is?" The man clicked his pen dramatically and said, "New traffic safety measure, HOA board directive. Keeps non-members from tearing through the neighborhood." "This is a county road," Noah said, voice flat. "Board says otherwise." Noah stared. "You realize disabling vehicles on a public road is not just illegal, it's dangerous." "If you have a problem, take it up with President Greaves," the man replied, tapping a remote on his belt. Just then, a red sedan turned onto the road, clearly unaware. A sickening pop-pop rang out, followed by a horrified yell. 2 tires down. Car limped to the side. Driver got out, swearing, pointing at the spikes. Noah gripped his wheel. Something inside him shifted. Slow, cold, final. They'd crossed the line, and they were about to find out exactly how wrong that was. Noah didn't rush his next move. He didn't need to. The HOA had already done most of the work for him. On camera, no less. Back at his office, a low-slung building that still had a rotary phone mounted on the wall out of pure stubbornness. He pulled the latest county plat map. Maple Ridge Road, all half-mile of it, was publicly maintained, owned by the county. That meant it was his jurisdiction. And that meant the HOA's latest stunt wasn't just overreach. It was obstruction of public property. Maybe even criminal mischief. Hell, if someone got hurt, that could spiral fast. But Noah wasn't just a sheriff. He was a strategist. He opened a new case file, titled it Maple Ridge Incident, ongoing HOA actions. Then, he began to dig. The HOA's president, Donald Greaves, had been a name on the edge of local politics for years. Loud at town halls, obsessive about order and aesthetics. He ran the Maple Ridge HOA like it was a private military installation, complete with his own enforcement team, security guards he called compliance officers. Gregory Tills was one of them, the guy with the mirrored sunglasses and the spike strip remote. Noah pulled up footage from his dashcam. It clearly showed Greg bragging about controlling the spikes and targeting non-stickered vehicles. Even more useful was the time-stamped recording from the sheriff deputy who had driven through 2 weeks prior, also caught on spikes, despite showing a badge. That clip had gone unreported. The deputy hadn't pushed it up the chain, didn't want to rock the boat. Well, now the boat was rocking on its own. The next morning, Noah called a closed-door meeting with the county commissioner, a city engineer, and a civil attorney from the State Department of Transportation. After a brief rundown, the expressions on their faces turned from confusion to concern to full-blown disbelief. "You're telling me," the attorney asked, squinting, "the HOA installed mechanical tire-destroying devices on a public road and is using them to enforce selective access?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Noah replied. "This is a liability bomb," the city engineer muttered. "It violates public access, road safety codes, even ADA compliance. If an emergency vehicle hit one of those, we'd be looking at lawsuits from 3 directions." Commissioner Walters leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "You planning to make a move?" Noah nodded once. "With your approval. I need jurisdictional authority to remove the spike system and formally open a criminal investigation into HOA leadership." "You've got it," Walters said. "Burn them down, Sheriff." Legally, of course. Noah didn't smile. Not yet. Too many times he'd seen big egos walk away clean because no one had the guts to fight them. This time, he would be that fight. By afternoon, Noah had coordinated with local road crews to begin removal of the devices at dawn, under county order. But he needed more than that. He needed evidence of pattern. So he canvassed the neighborhood. He knocked on doors, not as a sheriff, but as a neighbor. And what he found made his stomach churn. One woman fined $250 for unapproved lawn decorations. Her crime? A rainbow-colored birdhouse. A veteran couple threatened with lien action for installing a wheelchair ramp without architectural approval. A single dad written up 3 times for inconsistent trash bin placement, despite having footage showing wind had knocked them over. Noah wrote everything down, every complaint, every name, every dollar. He wasn't building a case anymore, he was building a reckoning. At the last house, an elderly man opened the door, oxygen tank hissing at his side. "Sheriff," he rasped. "You hear about the spies?" Noah blinked. "Spies." The man chuckled. "Cameras. They installed little ones on the street poles. Said it was for safety. But they're pointed at our driveways, not the road." That was it. That was the last straw. As Noah walked back to his truck, clipboard full, a silent conviction settled in his chest. This wasn't just HOA overreach. This was systemic abuse. And he was going to expose it, piece by piece, until every last fake badge, spike trap, and power trip was ripped out by the roots. The following weekend, the signs went up. Literally. "No unauthorized entry. HOA security checkpoint ahead." Warning. Vehicles without approved stickers may be stopped. Jake Carter couldn't believe his eyes. Nancy Wilkins and the HOA board weren't backing down. They were doubling down. Spike strips might have been temporarily deactivated under county orders, but now they'd set up physical barriers. Plastic barricades guarded by volunteers in fluorescent vests. Walkie-talkies clipped to their hips like sidearms. They stood at the neighborhood entrance like rent-a-cops from a bad movie, stopping cars, checking registry lists, even photographing license plates. Jake's phone started ringing off the hook. "Tom, again. They blocked my daughter from coming over to visit. Said she wasn't cleared to enter." Mrs. Devlin from Maple Bend. They told my cleaning lady she needed to submit an HOA application just to enter. I nearly lost it. A teenage boy in the neighborhood posted a video to TikTok of Greg, the same Greg, yelling at a pizza delivery driver for trespassing. The clip went viral. Over 100,000 views in a day. Comments exploded. HOA power trip is real. This a neighborhood or North Korea? Somebody call a real sheriff. Jake didn't need to be called. He was already 10 steps ahead. By Monday morning, he'd filed an official complaint with the state attorney general's office. He submitted a full binder of evidence, dozens of resident complaints, drone footage of the unauthorized checkpoint, digital footage from Greg's nightly patrols, and, most damningly, a ledger. It came from a former HOA board member, a whistleblower. Her name was Tina Caldwell, soft-spoken, mid-40s, had once been Nancy's biggest supporter, but the checkpoint was her line in the sand. I thought we were just maintaining standards, Tina had told Jake during their private meeting at the sheriff's office. But Nancy, she started talking like we were running a state, that we had to retrain the residents. Jake could hardly believe it. Tina brought the ledger, handwritten and meticulous, Nancy's handwriting. Every fine issued, every dollar collected. Some fees listed as voluntary security contributions had gone straight into a slush fund. No paper trail, no receipts, just cash. Jake leaned back in his chair. He had them, and now it was time to rally the people. The next evening, Jake stood before a packed town hall. Folding chairs filled the room. People lined the walls. Some had come from neighboring communities just to listen in. This is not a war against homeowners associations, Jake began, his voice steady. It's a fight against abuse of power. He held up a photograph of the spike strips. This is not safety. This is intimidation. Murmurs spread across the room. He held up another image, Greg, yelling at the pizza guy, hand on his holster like he was law enforcement. This is not neighborhood watch. This is harassment. And then the bombshell. He passed out copies of the financial ledger, redacted, but real. Numbers circled in red, illegally collected fines, unexplained expenditures, security bonuses paid in cash. This is fraud, and it's time we put a stop to it. A woman in the crowd stood. What can we do? Jake smiled. Show up, speak up, and sign your names. We're filing a petition with the county to formally dissolve the Maple Ridge HOA board. A beat of silence, then applause, then a wave of people rising to their feet, shouting over one another. I'll sign. Count me in. About damn time. Jake didn't just want legal action. He wanted community action. He wanted the people to take their power back. As the crowd dispersed, energized and united, Jake felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Tina. They're going to come after you next, she said. Jake gave her a calm nod. Let them. Because now, he wasn't just a sheriff. He was the face of something bigger, a quiet rebellion, against those who used bylaws as weapons. And the fuse had just been lit. 2 days after the town hall, Jake Carter woke to the sound of pounding on his front door. It wasn't panic pounding. It was deliberate, controlled, legal. When he opened the door, he found 2 sharply dressed men standing there with briefcases and clipboards. Sheriff Carter, one asked. You've been served. He handed over a thick envelope. Inside, a cease and desist letter filed by the Maple Ridge HOA legal team, signed off by a big city law firm. The allegations? Defamation, interference in private organizational matters, and unlawful disclosure of confidential HOA records. Jake chuckled dryly. Guess they're scared. He wasn't wrong. Nancy Wilkins was furious and desperate. Since the town hall, over 80% of residents had signed the petition to dissolve the HOA board. Local news had picked up the story. Talk radio shows were dissecting the case, labeling Maple Ridge as a powder keg community caught in a civil war over authoritarian HOA policies. But Nancy wasn't backing down. She had money, lawyers, and just enough loyal board members to push back. She started striking back where it hurt. Within 48 hours of the petition, multiple residents who'd spoken out received fines: missed trash pickup, $250; unapproved mailbox flower baskets, $475; holiday flags displayed out of season, $325; violation of community morale clause, $500. Yes, you read that right. Community morale. It was a clause buried deep in the HOA charter, rarely used, never enforced. Until now. It gave Nancy the authority to issue fines for behavior disruptive to the harmony and image of Maple Ridge Estates. Jake read it out loud to his deputy, then burst out laughing. This is a suburban dictatorship. But not everyone was laughing. Some residents panicked. They took down their protest signs, refused interviews. One woman even posted a tearful apology on the community board, begging to keep her garden gnomes after a $1,000 violation notice. The intimidation was working. Jake could feel the pressure. The county commission was supportive, but cautious. The media was interested, but flighty. And residents? Some were brave, but most were still afraid of the fines, the threats, the retribution. Then things escalated. Jake came home to find his mailbox smashed in. Spray painted across the side of his truck were 3 words: stay in line. He didn't flinch. He'd dealt with worse. But that same night, someone tossed a brick through the window of Tina Caldwell's home. That was different. Tina had 2 kids, a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. Neither hurt, but they were terrified. Jake sat with her on the porch, a quiet rage boiling beneath his calm. "This isn't just HOA drama anymore," Tina whispered. "They're trying to scare us into silence." Jake nodded. "Then it's time we stop being quiet." The next day, Jake called a press conference. He stood in front of the Maple Ridge community sign, the same one Nancy had unveiled 2 years ago, with a ribbon-cutting ceremony and 3 photographers. Now, that sign had graffiti on it. "No kings here." "I'm not here to wage war with homeowners associations," Jake said, eyes sharp behind aviator sunglasses. "But when an HOA becomes a front for harassment, fraud, and organized extortion, it's not a neighborhood issue. It's a legal issue." He held up a photo of Tina's broken window. "This is what happens when power goes unchecked." He announced a full investigation, county-sanctioned. Search warrants had been issued. Audits were underway. And yes, criminal charges were being considered. Multiple. Nancy Wilkins, of course, denied everything. She held her own press conference, wore pearls, had a lawyer flanking each side. "This is a politically motivated witch hunt," she said. "We are simply enforcing long-standing community standards. Sheriff Carter is out of line." Jake didn't respond to her directly. He didn't need to. Because later that afternoon, the whistleblower file Tina had provided went public. And it included audio. Recordings of board meetings. Nancy bragging about controlling the narrative. Greg laughing about milking the new residents. A board member joking about replacing the less classy homeowners through fines and pressure. The audio hit social media like a thunderclap. Local news picked it up instantly. State news, next day. Cable news, the following morning. Suddenly, the HOA wasn't facing just Jake. They were facing the court of public opinion, and they were losing fast. That night, as Jake reviewed the latest reports, Tom stopped by his porch. "You think they're gonna quit now?" he asked. Jake took a long sip of black coffee. "Nope," he said. "They're gonna burn the whole boardroom down before they let go." Tom leaned against the railing. "So what now?" Jake looked out over the neighborhood. Porch lights, evening sprinklers, children laughing somewhere down the street. "Now," Jake said, "we fight like hell." The line had been crossed, and now Sheriff Jake Carter wasn't just enforcing the law, he was defending his community. Within 48 hours of the leaked HOA recordings, the atmosphere in Maple Ridge changed. Quiet streets buzzed with energy. Neighbors who used to nod and pass in silence now huddled on sidewalks, trading updates, watching the news, forwarding links. The HOA's iron grip was cracking, and people could feel it. But Nancy Wilkins wasn't going down without a fight. She doubled down, issued new citations en masse, suspended neighborhood privileges for non-compliant households, and even blocked access to the online HOA portal for any resident who had signed the petition to dissolve the board. Worse, she filed an emergency injunction to stop the county investigation, citing irreparable harm to the HOA's ability to govern. That didn't sit well with the judge. During the emergency hearing, Jake testified calmly, clearly, laying out the timeline of events and showing proof of retaliation, misappropriation of funds, and selective enforcement of rules. The judge was unmoved by Nancy's tearful statement about losing her sense of purpose, and rejected the injunction. Nancy left the courthouse red-faced and silent, followed by cameras and a protest sign that read, "No one voted for you, Nancy." But then, things got personal. That night, Jake's deputy, Emily Harper, found her home egged, her garage tagged with the word traitor. Another deputy's mailbox was stolen. Anonymous flyers appeared around the neighborhood, accusing Jake and his team of ruining the community and being anti-family and anti-order. And then came the letter. It was slipped under Jake's door in the middle of the night, unmarked, folded twice. A single sentence typed in bold black letters. "If you don't stop, someone you care about will get hurt." Jake stared at it for a long time. His mind flashed to Tina's kids, to Deputy Harper, to the neighbors who had bravely spoken out. This wasn't just about power anymore. It was about fear. Jake called a closed meeting the next day. 20 residents showed up, those who had been fined, intimidated, or harassed. He shared the letter and what it meant. "Whoever sent this wants us to back off," he said. "They think fear will win. But this isn't the kind of community that folds under pressure." An older man in the back, Mr. Lennox, stood up. "You think we're scared of a woman who fines us for wind chimes?" A few people chuckled, but Jake's face stayed serious. "We've got one chance to end this the right way, legally, publicly, and permanently. If we go off script now, we give them ammunition." Then he told them the plan. The final HOA meeting of the fiscal year was scheduled for Friday night. It was mandatory for board members, and by HOA charter, had to be open to all residents. Jake had already confirmed with the state attorney's office. They'd be sending an official to observe. Jake's deputies would provide security. And most importantly, he had something Nancy didn't know about yet. 3 former HOA board members, ones Nancy had alienated and pushed out, had come forward. Each provided affidavits, backed by emails and financial ledgers. One of them had access to the private HOA email server. They gave Jake everything: bank transfers, bribe emails, messages confirming fines were being used to silence specific households. The picture was clear. Nancy had turned the HOA into her own private kingdom. But Friday had one more surprise. As the meeting began, over 100 residents packed the clubhouse, more than had ever attended any HOA event in its history. Some stood, some sat on the floor, others watched from windows outside. They were done being quiet. Nancy took the podium, pale but defiant. She gave a rehearsed speech about rebuilding trust and reinstating community pride. She tried to downplay the media coverage and called the leaked recordings deeply edited misinformation. That's when Jake stepped forward, flanked by 2 deputies and the state attorney. He didn't yell. He didn't grandstand. He just played the raw audio. Nancy's voice, clear as day. "We fine them until they move. That's how we keep the neighborhood clean. I don't care if it's legal. I care if they comply. If Carter wants a war, we'll give him one." Then came the documents. Projectors lit up the walls. showing spreadsheets with misappropriated funds, personal purchases charged to the HOA, and a $12,000 transfer to a consulting company. That didn't exist. Gasps turned into shouting. One resident stood and pointed at Nancy. "You used our money for spa treatments and security cameras to spy on us?" Nancy backed away from the podium, visibly trembling. Jake stepped forward one last time. "Effective immediately," he said. "Nancy Wilkins is being taken into custody for investigation into fraud, extortion, and conspiracy." His deputy read her Miranda rights as she was led away. The room stayed silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. Not cheers. Applause. Slow, steady. The sound of people reclaiming something they didn't even know they'd lost. Their voice. Their power. Their community. The morning after Nancy Wilkins' arrest, a strange stillness settled over Millstone Grove. Not the eerie kind. This was the kind of calm that comes after a storm. The quiet satisfaction of knowing the worst was behind you. The HOA signs were still up, but they were no longer symbols of fear. They were relics of a reign that had finally come to an end. Sheriff Jake Carter stood on his porch with a cup of coffee, staring out at the street where, just days ago, cars had been stopped by spike strips and residents fined for flower choices. Today, kids biked freely again. Neighbors waved more openly, and nobody was watching them from a clipboard. That evening, an emergency community meeting was held, not under the HOA's banner, but under a handwritten sign that read, "Millstone Grove Town Gathering." No suits, no gavel, just folding chairs, cookies, and people. Jake sat quietly at the back while the residents took turns speaking. There were stories, some heartbreaking, others ridiculous. A single mom who'd been fined $500 for an inflatable pool. An older couple forced to repaint their house 3 times. A veteran who was nearly foreclosed on over a non-compliant mailbox. But what stood out wasn't the pain. It was the resilience and the sense of unity. For the first time in years, these people weren't just neighbors. They were allies. When someone suggested they form a new neighborhood council, with fair elections, real transparency, and voluntary participation, people cheered. No more mandatory dues. No more fines for garden gnomes. Just a community deciding together how to live and how to respect one another. Jake was asked to speak. He hesitated, but when he finally rose, the room went still. "I didn't come here to fix the HOA," he said. "I came here to live quietly, just like all of you. But when quiet turns into silence, and silence is used to control, that's when we speak." He paused, scanning the faces before him. Tired, hopeful, free. You stood up for each other. That's what matters. And that's what makes a place worth protecting. The applause that followed was thunderous. Not just for Jake, but for each other. In the weeks that followed. Chopin. The HOA office was permanently shut down and converted into a shared community library and event space. Former board supporters slowly faded from relevance, most choosing not to attend future gatherings. Nancy and Greg faced multiple charges. A civil suit was launched by over 60 households. Restitution was ordered. Their assets, including a luxury SUV Nancy had billed to the HOA, were seized to repay the community fund. But perhaps the most powerful change wasn't legal or structural. It was emotional. People started visiting each other again. Holidays were celebrated with genuine spirit, not competition. Lawn decorations got wilder, weirder, and more fun. A spontaneous, freedom from the HOA block party became an annual tradition, complete with piñatas shaped like spike strips. Jake never sought credit, but the nickname Sheriff of the People stuck. Someone even made a metal sign and quietly bolted it onto the old HOA entrance gate, now left open year-round. He let it stay. Buddy, Jake's loyal old German shepherd, had a spot under the oak tree where he'd nap while kids played around him. And every so often, someone would bring by a plate of cookies or a cup of coffee to thank the sheriff, who reminded them what freedom looked like. Jake always gave the same reply. "You didn't need me." You just needed the truth and each other. And so Millstone Grove moved forward, not with fear, but with laughter. Not with rules, but with respect. And somewhere in the quiet hours of the night, Jake would sit on his porch, sip his coffee, and smile. Because he knew, deep down, that peace wasn't something you enforced. It was something you protected, with courage, clarity, and when necessary, a badge.